My name is Sandra, and this is how the man I once called my husband kicked me out of our tiny apartment, laughed as I left with nothing, and how I turned that heartbreak into power by buying the house he always dreamed of. Grab a blanket, settle in, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if this touches something in you, don't forget to hit subscribe. You're not alone anymore. The cold wind cut across my face as I stood on the cracked sidewalk, my arms wrapped around a duffel bag that weighed less than the silence between us. He didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway of our apartment. No, his apartment now, watching me with that same blank expression he used when I cried the night he forgot our anniversary. One hand on the doorknob, the other already reaching for the light switch. Like I was a guest who overstayed her welcome. Like I hadn't built every inch of that life with him. I don't even remember if I blinked when the door finally clicked shut. I stood there for a while, long enough to wonder if maybe he'd open it again and say, "Come back, let's talk." But he didn't. I could still smell the spaghetti I cooked that morning on my sweater, the last meal I'd make in that kitchen. The street lamp above buzzed faintly, flickering like it was struggling to decide whether I deserved to be seen. I dragged the bag to the curb. A faded taxi slowed down and stopped, the driver glancing at me with a hesitation that stung. I didn't look like someone heading to the airport or visiting a friend. I looked like someone who'd just been discarded. As the cab pulled away from the apartment I used to call home, I caught one last glimpse of the living room window, the curtains I sewed myself, now half drawn. I didn't cry. Not yet. My tears were too proud to fall in front of a stranger. But something inside me curled up and died in that back seat, right between 14th and Lincoln, where he first told me he loved me on a snowy night 12 years ago. That man no longer existed, and maybe neither did the woman who believed him. It didn't happen all at once. That's what people get wrong about betrayal. It's not always a loud slam or a thrown glass. Sometimes it's a slow erosion, a drawer that stops being shared. A tone that changes. A look that lingers too long at someone else. 6 months earlier, we were still us. Or at least I was pretending we were. The Denver apartment was small. Too small for a couple trying to hold a marriage together with duct tape and denial. But I made it a home. Candles, little plants on the windowsill, Sunday morning pancakes. And he made excuses. Late nights at the office. Business trips that kept getting extended. A new cologne I didn't buy. I remember the exact moment I knew. It was a Tuesday. I had made his favorite, baked salmon with dill and lemon, and he came home 3 hours late, eyes glassy, tie loosened. He barely noticed the food, just walked past me, mumbling something about being exhausted. I sat at the table, alone, staring at 2 plates, and suddenly felt like a ghost in my own marriage. That night, I didn't confront him. I just watched him sleep, wondering when the man I loved had started dreaming of someone else. The next morning, I found the receipt. A boutique hotel downtown, 2 nights, 1 room. His name was on it, and so was hers. I didn't scream, didn't throw things. I folded the receipt, tucked it in the back of my journal, and went about my day. I needed time. Space to think. But time wasn't something he was planning to give me. Because 3 days later, he came home early, with divorce papers. His voice was calm, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it all on the drive back. I think we've both known this isn't working anymore. No apology, no shame, just cold, measured detachment. And honestly, he added, not meeting my eyes, this place is already tight. You'll probably want to stay with your sister while we sort this out. Just like that. Like I was an overnight guest at a motel, not his wife of 9 years. I don't even remember packing. I just remember him watching me from the kitchen doorway as I zipped up my bag. No sadness. Just relief. That's what hurt the most. I wanted to scream, to ask why, to beg for an answer that would make sense of the empty feeling in my chest. But instead, I nodded, stepped outside, and watched him shut the door behind me. When I got to my sister's house that night, I collapsed onto her couch and let the sobs out. Loud, ugly, throat-burning sobs that sounded like every year I gave to him. I cried until I had no voice left. My sister, bless her, didn't say I told you so, even though she could have. She just held me, her arms warm and solid like the walls I no longer had. "You gave him your best years, Sandra," she whispered. "Now give yourself the rest of them." Those words stayed with me, echoed every night I couldn't sleep. Every morning I woke up feeling like I'd been hollowed out. And then one morning, still in my pajamas, sipping bitter coffee in her kitchen, I opened a folder he'd accidentally left in the apartment when I packed. That's when I saw it. Blueprints, floor plans, photos of a house, a big one, stucco, wood beams, wraparound porch, just outside the city. A handwritten note on top in his all-caps chicken scratch. Dream house. One day, something in me snapped. Not out of revenge, not out of hate, but because I suddenly saw the man he still wanted to become, and realized he had never seen me in that dream. He had made room for a future without me. So I decided to build one without him, and I knew exactly where to start. I stared at that photo of the dream house again, tracing the porch with my thumb. He didn't think I'd survive without him, but he didn't know who I was before I met him, and he sure as hell didn't know who I was about to become. Before it all fell apart, I truly believed we were building something solid. Not extravagant, not headline-worthy, but ours. Small victories, whispered dreams, shared grocery lists, and Sunday mornings. Our apartment wasn't much. A second-floor walk-up in an old brick building with radiators that groaned louder than we did during arguments. But I had convinced myself that love could live in tight spaces, that maybe the cramped kitchen and tiny closet were just part of the charm. Back then, I was working part-time at a community college, teaching Intro to Communications. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. Helping students find their voice, many of whom had never believed they had one. It felt important, grounded. My days were simple: early coffee, lesson planning, lectures, coming home before sunset to start dinner. And every time I heard his key in the door, I'd pause whatever I was doing, just for that moment. That moment when he'd walk in and say, "Hey babe, smells good," even when it was just reheated leftovers. His name was Eric. Everyone said we looked good together. He was tall, easy smile, the kind of man who knew how to wear a jacket without looking like he was trying too hard. And charming. God, was he charming. Especially in public. He knew how to make people laugh, how to lean in when someone was talking so they felt important. But in private, that charm didn't always translate. At first, it was small things. A sarcastic joke that landed wrong. A sigh when I asked him to take out the trash. Laughing a little too long when I forgot something. I brushed it off. Relationships are work, right? No one's perfect. We met at a friend's wedding, actually. He was the best man. I was the bridesmaid. He said I looked like I didn't belong in a crowd full of noise, that I seemed like the kind of woman who reads more than she talks. I remember thinking it was such an oddly specific compliment, but it stuck with me. We fell into each other quickly, moved in after just 6 months. I remember telling my sister that it felt like gravity, like I didn't even have a choice. She smiled tight-lipped, asked if I was sure. I told her yes. Eric had a job in real estate, not the agent kind, but property investment. He always had big ideas. Renovate this, flip that. He'd scroll through listings at night, muttering numbers under his breath, dreaming out loud. "What about this one, babe? Look at the kitchen. Can't you see us here?" I'd smile, imagining our lives in those glossy Zillow photos. But they always felt distant, like he was chasing a life we hadn't quite earned yet. Still, I played along. I kept things grounded, balanced our budget, reminded him when bills were due. I thought that made us a good team, dreamer and doer. I didn't realize he resented that balance. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I had just finished grading papers and texted him to grab milk on the way home. He didn't respond. Nothing unusual. But when he walked in later that night, empty-handed, he looked surprised when I reminded him. Oh, right, sorry, got caught up. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, didn't pick it up. That wasn't like him. Normally, he couldn't resist a notification. I remember that. I remember the way he tucked the phone screen down on the counter. The way he kissed me on the cheek. Too quick. Like a reflex. The next morning, I found his phone left unlocked. I didn't go looking. I swear I didn't. It was just there. Open. Lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Last night was perfect, still thinking about your hands. I didn't say anything. I told myself there had to be a reason, a misunderstanding. It could be a joke, a wrong number. Anything but what it looked like. But something shifted in me that day. I became smaller, quieter. Like if I shrank just enough, maybe I wouldn't be replaced. I started trying harder, making his favorite meals, dressing up more, even for quick grocery runs. I changed my shampoo because he once said he liked a scent a woman wore at his office. I became the version of me I thought he wanted. And in doing that, I stopped being myself. But he didn't notice. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. We had this tradition, or we used to. Friday night takeout, pad thai, extra peanuts. We'd sit on the couch, legs tangled, watching old crime dramas and making up better endings. One night he came home late, said he wasn't hungry, said he had a late meeting. I found the takeout bag in the trash the next morning. Not from our usual place. 2 drinks, 2 sets of chopsticks. I stared at it for a long time. Not crying, not angry. Just still. That was when the assumption cracked. The one I'd built everything on. That if you love someone well enough, they will love you back the same way. I had lived by that belief. Loved him deeply, wholly. Believed that partnership meant compromise, patience, endurance. But love, I was starting to learn, does not always echo. Sometimes it just absorbs. My sister Evelyn had always been wary of Eric. Said he had CEO eyes. Too smooth, too calculating. But I dismissed her. Told her she was being dramatic. That Eric was ambitious, not manipulative. She once asked me, "Has he ever supported your dreams the way you support his?" And I froze. Because I couldn't remember the last time I talked about my dreams out loud. There was a point, years ago, when I wanted to open a small communications consultancy, help local nonprofits with messaging, teach workshops. I even drew up a plan. Eric glanced at it once, said, "That's cute, babe, but it won't pay the bills." And just like that, I folded it up and never mentioned it again. It didn't feel cruel at the time, just practical. But looking back, it was one of many little deaths I accepted in order to keep the peace. One day, we were walking downtown and passed a beautiful craftsman-style home, wide porch, big windows, nestled under cottonwood trees. Eric stopped cold. "That," he said, pointing. "That's the dream." He went on about the layout, the hardwood floors, the fireplace. I nodded, smiling, even as something inside me dimmed. Because I knew, without him saying it, that I wasn't part of that picture. His dreams were growing bigger, and I was becoming invisible inside them. But I kept trying. Because I believed that love was enough, that if I just held on a little longer, the tide would turn. I was wrong. Love is enough, but not when you're the only one giving it. And now that I look back, the signs were everywhere. But sometimes, when you want to believe in someone, you learn to ignore the warnings your soul keeps whispering. I learned that the hard way. And by the time I heard those whispers, it was already too late. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after the truth. Not peace, not quiet. Just a hollow stillness like sound itself has retreated out of respect for what you've just uncovered. That's how it felt the moment I saw the photo. It was a simple Instagram story. One of Eric's co-workers had posted it without thinking. A boomerang of clinking glasses during some work dinner. A hand reached into the frame with a wine glass. Red nails, gold bracelet. Eric's arm looped around her chair, his smile relaxed, intimate. The kind of smile you don't wear in public unless you've long stopped hiding. I watched it replay over and over in my hands, her nails, his hand. The way their bodies leaned into each other like gravity had already made its choice. It wasn't just the story. It was everything it confirmed. The late nights, the new cologne, the empty glances. My gut had known long before my heart had the courage to admit it. I closed the app and sat there for what felt like hours. My mind replayed our last conversation. How he'd told me I was imagining things, that I was becoming too sensitive, that maybe I should focus on my work instead of digging for problems that aren't there. That sentence echoed through me now, venomous in hindsight. When he came home that night, I couldn't speak. I just stood in the kitchen, hands trembling around a coffee mug I hadn't taken a sip from in hours. He saw my face, went still for just a second, and then sighed. "You saw it," he said. "Not what are you talking about? Not even I can explain. Just, you saw it." And I knew. That sigh was his confession. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the mug. I just said 4 words I never imagined saying. "How long, Eric? How long?" He didn't look guilty. He looked tired. Like I was just another appointment he had to check off his day. "About 6 months," he said. "It started during that convention in Phoenix. 6 months. Half a year. Through my birthday. Through our anniversary. Through every meal I cooked, thinking I could win him back. My knees buckled and I sank to the floor, back against the cabinets. He didn't rush over. Just stood there, hands in his pockets, like this was some HR conversation he wanted to wrap up cleanly. "She makes me feel like myself again," he said, voice calm, rehearsed. "You used to. But somewhere along the way, you just became—" He stopped. But I knew what he was going to say. "You became heavy, needy, too much, not enough." I looked up at him from the floor, heart crumbling in slow motion. "So you found someone else to carry your dreams because I was too busy carrying your burdens?" That struck him. But only for a second. He turned away, ran a hand through his hair and muttered, "I think it's best if you move out." And just like that, I was evicted from my own life. I didn't go to my sister's right away. I wandered first, through the city, through myself. I sat in parks watching strangers live lives untouched by mine. I wandered the aisles of a bookstore until someone asked if I was okay. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. My body felt foreign. I'd look in mirrors and not recognize the woman staring back. Puffy eyes, blank expression, like something inside me had been scooped out and the skin just stayed standing. I thought about calling him, just to hear him lie one more time. To ask him if she laughed at his jokes the way I used to. To ask if he ever really loved me at all, or if I was just the training wheels for his real relationship. But I didn't call. I couldn't. My voice didn't feel like mine anymore. At night, I cried into a pillow like it owed me answers. The kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deeper than the lungs. From the marrow. From the spirit. Every corner of my soul collapsed on itself like a house with a hollow frame. I kept replaying everything I missed. Every clue. Every moment I laughed at his jokes while he texted her under the table. Every dinner I lit candles for. Every kiss he gave me with her perfume still on his collar. And worst of all, I still missed him. That's what no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't erase love, it just infects it. It turns it into something toxic you can't stop drinking because the thirst is so familiar. I'd reach for my phone at night, half asleep, to send him something funny. Muscle memory. Then remember, he's not yours anymore. He never really was. My identity unraveled quickly. I was no longer a wife, no longer a partner. Just Sandra. Just someone who used to be something to someone who didn't even flinch while watching her break. I stopped teaching for a few weeks, told the college I needed a personal leave. I couldn't stand in front of students and talk about the power of finding your voice when mine had gone completely silent. Some days I didn't get out of bed. Other days I tried to distract myself organizing drawers, scrubbing floors, baking things I didn't eat, the motions of a life still running without purpose. But then came the shame, like waves, drowning me. How did I not see it? Was I that boring? Was I not enough? Was she prettier? Younger? Smarter? I spiraled, from grief into fury, from heartbreak into humiliation. My mind waged war on itself, one voice pleading for closure, the other craving revenge. And somewhere beneath all of it was a third voice, barely audible, but persistent. Wake up, reclaim yourself. But I wasn't ready yet. Not to heal, not to fight, not even to feel. I was still spiraling, still sleeping in my sister's guest room, surrounded by bags I hadn't unpacked, still waking up with that split second of peace before memory punched me in the chest again. I tried journaling. The pages became graveyards for all the words I never said to him. Rage, regret, begging, confessions, letters I never sent. One night, I wrote, "I'm scared I'll never be whole again." And then I added, "But maybe I was never whole with him in the first place." That night, I dreamed of the house. The one from his folder, the wraparound porch, the golden beams of light cutting through the living room windows. But this time, I wasn't standing beside him. I was standing alone, holding the keys. The next morning, something shifted. Not a transformation. Not yet. But a crack of light. A breath that didn't feel suffocating. A memory that didn't hurt quite as sharply. I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "You are not the discarded version of anyone's dream." I said it again, louder, and my voice, brittle as it was, finally belonged to me again. I wasn't healed, but I was awake. Healing isn't beautiful in the beginning. It's raw. It's clawing at the walls of your own mind, trying to find an exit out of pain. It's crying on the floor over a man who stopped thinking about you weeks ago. It's thinking you're okay for half a day and then dissolving when a song you used to dance to comes on the radio. I wasn't healing. I was surviving. Barely. For the first time in my adult life, I had no plan, no schedule, no one to cook for, no one to check in with, just empty days and 2 quiet nights. I started making poor decisions, not dangerous ones, just the kind that scrape your self-worth raw. I texted him. Once, then twice. He never responded. I even drove past the apartment one night. The lights were on. A woman's silhouette moved through the living room, wearing what looked like one of my old sweaters. My throat closed up, and I drove away before I humiliated myself further. I tried dating apps, swiping, messaging men I didn't care about just to feel wanted again. I'd meet them for coffee and smile through conversations that made me feel more alone than staying home ever could. I wasn't ready, but I didn't know what else to do with the ache. One guy, Steve, seemed kind, easygoing, funny even. He said he liked low-maintenance women. I laughed and said, "That used to be me." We saw each other for a few weeks, until one night we were at a bar and he asked why I didn't want to go back to his place. I told him I wasn't there yet. He said, "You're divorced, not dead." I left, cried in the car, and didn't reply when he texted the next day. I was lost. Really lost. Not in the poetic, soul-searching way people talk about in books. I was lost like someone who can't find the light switch in a room they built with their own hands. My sister tried. She really did. She made tea, sat with me, sent me articles about healing and trauma. But after a while, I saw the exhaustion in her eyes. I was becoming a weight, and I knew it. But I didn't know how to stop sinking. One afternoon, I snapped at her over something small, the way she folded my laundry. "Why are you even doing my clothes? I'm not a child." Her face crumpled. "Sandra, I just want to help." I apologized, but it wasn't enough. That night, I packed a bag and told her I was going to stay with a former colleague who had an extra room. I wasn't. I just couldn't be someone's burden anymore. I booked a cheap Airbnb across town. Basement unit. Musty carpet. No windows. The kind of place where the air feels stale even when you open the door. That's where I hit my rock bottom. I stayed in bed for 3 days straight, ate dry cereal out of the box, watched old crime documentaries until my eyes burned. I turned my phone off, didn't answer the door when the host knocked to check in. I wrote in my journal until the ink ran out, then scribbled thoughts on napkins. On the 4th morning, I woke up to a pounding headache and a chest so tight I thought I was dying. I wasn't. I was having my first panic attack. And the terrifying part was, a small part of me welcomed it. At least it was something. At least it made me feel real. I called a therapist the next day. Found her through a friend of a friend. Her name was Dr. Felicia Wren, middle-aged, clear eyes, a voice like warm gravel. She didn't ask for my story up front. She just said, "We'll go slow." That first session, I sobbed for 40 straight minutes. I don't even know what I said. But she didn't flinch. Just nodded, occasionally offering tissues, occasionally asking, "And what did that make you feel like?" Week after week, I showed up. Still broken, still confused, still bleeding from places I didn't have names for. But I kept coming. We talked about the betrayal. But more than that, we talked about the woman who allowed herself to disappear inside someone else's dreams. "I keep asking why he did this to me," I told her once. She leaned in. "Maybe the better question is, why didn't you believe you deserved more?" That one hit hard, because I didn't. Not really. I'd spent so long bending to accommodate someone else's ambition that I forgot what my own even looked like. One morning after a session, I walked past a bookstore that had a sign in the window. "Writing Workshop, Healing Through Words, starts Thursday." I hesitated. I hadn't written anything besides angry journal entries and unsent letters. But something about the sign felt personal, like it was meant for me. I signed up. That Thursday, I sat in a room with 6 strangers and a facilitator named Marla. She had a silver braid, hands covered in rings, and the gentlest laugh I'd ever heard. She welcomed me without asking questions. Each week we wrote prompts like, "The moment I lost myself," or "What I never got to say." I wrote, cried, read aloud. And for the first time in months, I felt seen. It wasn't a straight lineup. Healing never is. I had days where I backslid, where I'd look at photos of our wedding and ask what it was all for. Days I questioned whether I had wasted a decade of my life. But then came the false hope. A text. From Eric. Just 4 words. "Hope you're doing okay." My heart jumped. I stared at the screen for a full 10 minutes before responding. "Trying to." He replied, "I've been thinking about you." And just like that, I was 15 steps backward. We exchanged messages for a few days. He told me things with vague softness, said he missed our talks, that she wasn't what he thought, that maybe we moved too fast, that maybe we gave up too soon. I fell for it. Of course I did. We agreed to meet for coffee. I wore a sweater he once said he loved, did my makeup, smiled like someone hopeful, stupidly hopeful. He arrived 20 minutes late, and when he walked in, he looked smug. Not sheepish, not sorry. Smug. We sat down, talked, and by the second cup of coffee he said, "I wanted to make sure there weren't any hard feelings. I'm proposing next month. Just wanted to clear the air." I went cold. "Proposing?" I whispered. He nodded. To her, I think honesty is important. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else." My stomach twisted. He hadn't missed me. He just wanted absolution. He wanted my silence, my blessing, my complicity. I stood up, left the cafe, and didn't look back. Outside, I screamed in the middle of the sidewalk. Not words, just noise. A sound that ripped out of me like a purging. Strangers looked. I didn't care. That night, I deleted his number. Burned the last letter I'd written to him. Blocked him on everything. And then, I made the sacrifice. I called my father. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the wedding. He'd disapproved of Eric from the beginning. said he saw through the charm. I cut him off back then, told him he was wrong. But now, I needed to face that shame. I apologized. He cried. I never wanted to be right, he said. I just wanted you to be loved. And for the first time, I let someone love me without guilt. I also turned down a job offer that would have brought in steady income, but kept me stuck in the same patterns. It was safe, but small. I didn't want safety anymore. I wanted sovereignty. The next week, I submitted my first workshop proposal, a small communication seminar for trauma recovery groups. Marla helped me polish it. Felicia reminded me, this is how you reclaim your voice. And somewhere deep inside, I started to believe her. I wasn't fully healed yet, but I had chosen myself. And this time, I wasn't looking back. I never thought peace could feel like power. For most of my life, I'd confused calm with silence, stillness with stagnation. But something changed after that coffee shop humiliation. It wasn't rage that moved me forward. It was the absence of desperation. The moment I walked away from Eric for the last time, I didn't look back. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to. I started getting up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to watch the sunrise. I'd wrap myself in a blanket, sit on the tiny balcony of the apartment I'd just rented on my own, a modest place on the east side with light that poured in like forgiveness, and sip coffee without the weight of anyone's expectations. I got a call from the community college where I used to teach. They wanted me back, but I told them no. Instead, I launched something of my own. It started small. A communication workshop I designed for women who had been through breakups, divorces, or just the slow erosion of self-worth that happens when you dim your light for someone else. I called it Reclaiming Voice. The first class had 4 women. By the 3rd month, I had a waiting list. There was something healing about watching other women step into their own language again. One of them, Maria, said, "This isn't just about public speaking. It's about speaking without apologizing." And she was right. That's what I had done for years. Apologized for existing too brightly, for wanting too much, for asking for partnership instead of servitude. But now I asked boldly. I invested in myself, took a course in trauma-informed communication, joined a local startup incubator for female-led nonprofits, got a small grant to expand the program to include teen girls from underserved schools. I didn't recognize this version of me, but I loved her. She was brave, not in the loud social media way. Quiet brave. She showed up for herself every morning, even when it would have been easier to stay in bed. She set boundaries. She no longer texted men who didn't follow through. She no longer justified bad behavior just because she was afraid of being alone. And slowly, my reflection started to look familiar again. Not because I went back to who I was, but because I finally became who I always was underneath it all. I still went to therapy with Felicia once a week. Sometimes we talked about Eric. Sometimes we didn't mention him at all. But one session she leaned forward and said, "You've built a life he couldn't even see because he never bothered to imagine you outside of him." That line stuck with me. Because it was true. Eric's version of me had been small, supportive, contained, but the real me was never meant to be a footnote. I started saying yes to things that once terrified me. A podcast interview, a speaking panel at a local women's conference, a video recording of one of my sessions that ended up getting shared thousands of times online. My inbox flooded with women asking, "How do I start over when I don't even know who I am?" I wrote them back, every single one, because I did know. You don't find yourself in grand epiphanies. You find yourself in the small, unglamorous moments where you choose peace over panic. Where you cook dinner for one and make it beautiful. Where you buy flowers with your own money. Where you unfollow your ex without announcing it. Where you laugh again. Real laughter, from your belly, not your throat. And eventually, you trust yourself with joy again. That's what happened when I met Julian. He wasn't a lightning bolt. He was a slow burn. We met at a local seminar I was co-facilitating. He was on a panel about emotional intelligence and leadership. I remember him speaking about his divorce and the grief of losing not just a partner, but the version of yourself that only existed with them. I saw him after the panel. We talked. He had kind eyes. He asked questions that weren't small talk. The next day, he emailed me a book recommendation. 2 days later, he asked if I'd like to grab tea. We took it slow. I told him everything. I didn't hide the wreckage. He didn't flinch. He shared his too. A failed marriage, a daughter he adored, a tendency to overthink. There were no games, just presence. He wasn't my savior. I didn't need one. But he saw me, not the broken parts, not the potential, me. And that felt like a miracle. I kept writing, not just for me anymore, for others. Blog posts, essays, a small ebook on healing through communication. I had speaking gigs lined up for the fall and a partnership with a local shelter to bring workshops to women starting over. One day, I opened my email and found a message from a producer at a national morning show. They had seen my online video. "Would you be willing to share your story on air?" I paused. Because that story, the old one, wasn't the center of who I was anymore. It was just the soil I grew from. I said yes, not for revenge, for resonance. Because somewhere, another woman was sitting in a musty Airbnb basement, wondering if she'd ever be whole again. And she needed to know. Yes, she would. It had been about a year since I left Eric's apartment. I had just finished a workshop one Thursday afternoon when Marla, the silver-haired mentor from my writing group, pulled me aside. "You look different," she said. "Not lighter, taller." I smiled. I feel taller. As I packed up my things, my phone buzzed. It was a real estate alert. I almost ignored it, but something nudged me to look. The house. The one from his folder. Stucco walls, wraparound porch, craftsman details. Just outside the city. Dream house. One day, it was for sale. I stared at the listing for a long time. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just knew. I called the agent, scheduled a tour. The day I walked through it, everything felt familiar. The golden beams, the creak of the floorboards, the smell of fresh paint. But instead of imagining Eric's voice echoing through the halls, I imagined mine, laughter, quiet mornings with coffee and jazz, workshops in the sunlit living room, letters written at a desk by the window. A life not dreamed with someone else. A life dreamed by me. The agent said there was already an offer, but it wasn't final. And I had something better than money now. Clarity. I made my own offer. All cash. From the grants, the book advance, the savings I'd protected fiercely since rebuilding my life. And it was accepted. I didn't cry. Not then. But that night, sitting on the porch, keys in hand, I finally understood. This wasn't a prize. It was a home. My home. And I hadn't taken it from anyone. I had taken it back, from the version of me who thought she needed permission to want more. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that someone else had also seen the listing. Someone who had once called it his dream. And he wasn't as done with the past as I was. Because a week later, I got a knock on the door. And when I opened it was Eric, looking at me like he'd just seen a ghost. I opened the door slowly, unsure at first if the heat outside was distorting my vision. But no, it was him. Eric, standing on my porch. The one he once drew in pencil sketches and labeled Someday. Except now, Someday had arrived. And I was the one holding the deed. He was in a tailored navy shirt, rolled sleeves, no tie. Hair styled just slightly too perfectly, like he'd rehearsed being casual. But his eyes gave him away. They darted behind me, scanning the inside of the house like he was trying to make sense of the universe folding in on itself. "Hi," he said, almost breathless. "I wasn't sure this was really yours." I had to see for myself. I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside, letting the screen door ease shut behind me. My bare feet met the warmth of the porch planks, and I folded my arms. Not in defense, just to feel the strength in my own body. He looked older, not by years, by weight. A slight sag in the corners of his mouth, tension in his jaw. It was subtle. The look of someone watching a version of their life they didn't get to live. I didn't speak. Just stood there. He looked over my shoulder again. I always pictured us sitting out here, he said. You, in a rocking chair. Me grilling something. He gave a soft chuckle. Crazy, huh? I raised an eyebrow. Crazy? He swallowed. I mean, you. This house. All of it. You actually did it. Yeah, I said. I did? Silence settled between us like thick honey. Heavy, golden, slow. He shifted. I was driving by. Saw the sign was gone. I didn't think it would be you. I tilted my head. Why not? He hesitated. I don't know. I guess I thought you'd go back to your sister's, or maybe take that teaching job again. Something simple, something safe. There it was. That old, veiled condescension. The assumption that I'd return to my small corner, patch myself up with a quiet life, and fade gently into the background. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. That's the thing about assuming who someone is based on how much you limited them. He looked stung, but recovered quickly. Look, I didn't come to fight. I just wanted to say, congratulations. I mean that. His eyes scanned the porch again, the beams, the detailing. The swing I'd installed myself, with help from Julian and a YouTube tutorial. You made it beautiful, he murmured. I made it mine, I replied. More silence. He tucked his hands into his pockets and gave me that half smile he used when he was unsure of his place in a room. Are you happy, Sandra? I didn't rush the answer. I let it breathe. Let the wind pick up and pass between us like time itself was watching. Yes, I said finally. Deeply. He looked away. I thought I was doing the right thing back then. Leaving. Choosing someone who made life easier. But sometimes, easier isn't better. I didn't respond. Because I didn't owe him rescue from his own regret. He hesitated. I guess I just wanted to see you one last time. Before everything changes again. He looked down, then up at me. I'm selling the apartment. Leaving Denver. She and I didn't work out. Surprise, surprise. He laughed bitterly. She wanted the version of me I sold her, not who I actually am. That must be hard, I said gently, but not with pity, with distance. He took a step closer. And you? You seeing someone? I didn't answer, just looked at him. He gave a slight nod. Right. None of my business. The weight of everything he threw away hung in the air between us. He was standing inside a picture he used to sketch. Only now he was the outsider, watching a woman he once knew become someone he never had the courage to believe in. You look different, he said. I waited. He clarified. Not like your hair or makeup. Just you. You look like you're not waiting for anything anymore. I let that sit. He looked down at the porch floor. I was wrong, Sandra, about so many things, but mostly, I was wrong about you. I thought you needed me. I nodded once. You did. A pause. Then I added softly, but it turns out, you were just the noise I had to lose to hear myself again. He closed his eyes for a beat. That line landed like a quiet piano chord. No volume, all gravity. He looked at me differently then. Not like an ex, not even like a memory, like a man seeing the woman he underestimated, fully, for the very first time. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. So he nodded, turned to leave, walked down the porch steps and paused on the gravel driveway. Before he got into the car, he looked back. I hope someday you'll forgive me. I didn't nod. I didn't promise anything. I just said, drive safe. And that was the end of it. He left, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. Inside, Julian was making coffee. The light was pouring through the kitchen windows, catching on the fresh white paint and the vase of sunflowers he bought that morning. I stepped back into the house, closed the door, and smiled. There are moments when life doesn't scream that it's changed. It just exhales, quietly, softly, like the sound of the wind brushing through curtains on a warm afternoon. That's what the days feel like now. Not triumphant, not cinematic, just honest, light, unburdened. I keep a letter tucked away in the drawer beside my bed. One I wrote the night I moved into the house. It's addressed to Eric, though I never sent it. Never intended to. It's not full of venom or heartbreak, just truths. I wrote about the version of myself I gave up to keep him comfortable. I wrote about the years I spent afraid of being too much, when I was really just too real. I wrote about the dreams I buried so we could chase his, and how, when he left, I had no choice but to dig them up and remember they were mine. Sometimes I read it, not out of pain, out of clarity. Like rereading an old chapter just to remind yourself how far the story has come. The mornings in this house are different now. I wake up to the sound of birds, not car horns or my own anxiety. The walls hold laughter now, not silence. There's music in the kitchen. Vinyl records usually, soft jazz or old soul. Julian and I have a weekend ritual, barefoot dancing while the coffee brews. It's not choreographed. It's not for show. It's just joy, pure and present. He never asks me to be smaller. He never measures me against my past. He holds space, not expectations. There's no scoreboard between us, no tug of war for power, just curiosity, shared dreams, and a kind of ease I never knew I was allowed to have. The Reclaiming Voice program has grown more than I ever imagined. We just launched a teen mentorship track. I hired 2 of my former students as facilitators. Watching them lead their own sessions now feels like watching seeds I didn't even know I planted finally bloom. Sometimes I speak at events, but not the kind that are about trauma anymore. Now it's about building, after. Not what broke us, but what made us afterwards. There's power in that pivot. I don't talk about Eric much. He's a footnote now, not in a petty way. In a peaceful one, like an old coat you outgrew and left at someone else's house. You don't need it back. It served its season. Sometimes women from my workshops ask if closure is real. I tell them the truth. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's the day you stop needing an apology to breathe again. It's the night you sleep through without dreaming of what you lost. It's the morning you wake up and decorate your coffee with cinnamon because it's your favorite, not theirs. I still journal. Only now, the pages are full of beginnings, ideas, plans, scribbled affirmations. You are not behind. You are becoming. I walk barefoot on the back porch every night, just before bed. The stars in Denver don't always show themselves, but when they do, I thank them. Not for fixing anything, just for staying, even when I couldn't see them. One evening, I found a folded piece of paper in an old moving box. It was one of Eric's sketches, a rough drawing of this house. The dream version, the one with a hammock, a garden, a space for a dog. I sat with it for a long time. Then I folded it again, placed it gently in the fireplace, lit a match, and let it go. Not in anger, in grace. Because some dreams are borrowed, some are stolen, and some are reclaimed. Last weekend, I painted the front door a deep emerald green. My mother once said that green meant growth and protection. That seemed right. I stood on the porch afterward, paint flecks on my forearm, and just looked out at the trees swaying. It was windy, but not cold. Everything moved, but nothing felt unstable. That's what healing feels like. Not perfection. Just being okay with motion. Julian came out holding 2 glasses of lemonade. He handed me one, kissed my forehead, and leaned against the rail beside me. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I smiled. That peace feels a lot like coming home, and I didn't know it lived in me all along. He nodded. It always did. We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything I'd fought for, everything I'd chosen. If I could go back and speak to the woman sitting on that curb with a duffel bag and tear-stained cheeks, I wouldn't tell her it gets better. I'd tell her this: you become better. You become wiser. You become free. And one day, you don't just survive, you bloom. And when you do, you buy the house he always wanted and make it everything you ever needed.